Hello and welcome to my Christian fiction podcast, where I share my stories with you. Right now, you're listening to Tangled Web, written and read by Eunice Wilkie. Chapter 14. Wednesday, the 6th of May, 2020. It had been a few days since Bob had deposited the banknote in his account. At first, he had counted the hours that he didn't hear from the bank, then the days. He hoped that no news was good news. It must have been accepted. If only he could access their online account, he would know for sure whether it showed as a legitimate deposit. But Kath dealt with all that. Before he had summoned the courage to explain the matter to Kath, he had serious doubts she would see his bold move as the stroke of genius he considered it. Before he had a chance to ask her to do her internet banking thing to see if they were 100 quid better off, before that, they received a phone call. What's more, which was just typical, it had to be Kath who answered the phone. Bob, here. It's the bank. They say there's a problem with a deposit or something. I told them we haven't done any deposits. Maybe it's a scam. Reluctantly, Bob followed his wife's hard-to-miss, increasing in volume, yells. She was pacing the kitchen with the hands-free house phone. Her narrowed eyes were laden with suspicion. They want to speak to you. She plonked the phone in his hand, then stood with her arms folded, watching him. Reluctantly, Bob put the phone receiver to his ear. He had his story all ready. He figured they could easily track him to the bank hole-in-the-wall at the supermarket where the deposit had been made. They would be certain to have a surveillance camera pinned on that, which would also tell them the exact time he made the deposit, which was undoubtedly time-stamped on the bank's records too. He hoped Kath would let him tell his story without screaming the place down in the background. Hello? Mr. Robert Gordon Geddes? Yep, that's me, love. Kath rolled her eyes. Trust Bob to try the charming act. A phony deposit into their bank account on the Saturday that Bob did the shopping. How could she have been so stupid not to immediately suspect he would try something? The old fool. Date of birth? What do you need that for? You going to send me a birthday card? Bob laughed. Kath seethed. Just do what they say, she hissed. Bob complied and continued the security checks that, while he joked that they were hardly necessary since they'd already spoken to his wife, were completed anyway. Then on to the details. Saturday the 2nd of May, 1907 hours. Bob repeated the details the female voice related. Well, if you say it was then, I must have made the deposit then, mustn't I? The kitchen door slammed behind him, and Bob flinched. He hoped the sound hadn't carried through the phone receiver, but at least Kath wasn't going to shout at him from the background. I know it sounds daft, but I found that banknote. Couldn't believe my luck. It blew through the fence into the garden. Might have come from next door. We've got a pretty weird neighbour. This was the mildest thing he could think to call Amanda since they had learned of her subterfuge. but I wasn't going to question it, and since it landed on my property, it's mine in law, right?" The woman on the phone sounded faintly sympathetic. "I'm afraid it's not that straightforward, sir, and unfortunately, the banknote you tried to deposit is fraudulent, which is a serious matter we need to—" "Wait, what do you mean it was fraudulent? It wasn't stolen, was it?" "The police will deal with whether the banknote was involved in a crime, but it was a fake note that you tried to pay into your account." "Fake?" Bob sighed dramatically. "I might have known it was too good to be true. I was going to buy Kath, that's my wife, something special. She hasn't been well through this virus thing. I thought it would cheer her up." Oh dear. What happens now? Am I in trouble? You going to report me to the police? Lock me up?" His voice was convincingly tremulous, and his chuckles suitably nervous. "Nothing like that, sir," the official quickly reassured. "We follow protocol and always report fraudulent banknotes to the police, but—" Bob sighed heavily. Oh dear, he repeated. "What have I got into now? And all I wanted was to buy Kath a little something." "Obviously, we can't credit your account with the £100, sir, and the police may want to hear how you came across the banknote. But other than that, the bank will consider the matter closed." When Bob touched the button to end the call, Kath opened the door and came back into the kitchen. The timing was too exact to be coincidence. Bob assumed she had been listening at the door. To his surprise, she didn't go ballistic. She crossed her arms and glared at him. That steady, silent stare was bad enough, though. And at last, Bob said, "Aren't you going to say anything?" She shrugged. "Well, I don't believe for a minute you were going to buy me something special, and it's nothing new that you're an old fool, but," she sighed, "it seems that we're both landed in it with this money. I should never have agreed to look after it." Bob shrugged, relieved that they weren't going to fight. "It's too late to go back, love. We need to decide what to do next. At least we now know the banknotes are fake." "Do you think all of the notes are fake?" Bob shrugged again. "Who knows? But my guess? Yeah, it all is." Kath was perplexed. "But what was their game then? I heard them say they had taken it from this man Terry, and that Terry might have killed that woman for it. Why would he murder someone for fake cash?" Bob suggested, "Maybe he didn't know it was fake. Or he was going to use it anyway, fraud. Or maybe this geezer Terry is playing his own game, stringing them along and letting them think they've got one up on him." Kath was silent. Bob was confident. "I think we wait. Those women don't know it's fake, do they? They think they might get murdered over it. Let 'em stew. That's the least we can do after what they've put us through. No one is likely to come looking for the money here, are they?" In the end, Kath went out. She took cable and, leaving Bob to rant and rave and plan as unpleasant a demise as possible for their neighbours, knowing this capital crime was unlikely to happen, she walked down the road towards Tordara Forest. When she reached the forest, she let Cable off his leash. What a lot of angst there had been over nothing. The money was fake after all. Kath was tired of the whole business. tired of her wanderings about what was right and wrong about it when it didn't matter anyway. Might they still be charged with receiving stolen goods or profiting from a crime or fraud or some such thing? The May sun shone through the trees, dabbing light here and there on the forest floor. A familiar border collie dashed towards Cable, and the two dogs milled around each other, mutually pleased. Coming towards her through the trees, following Peter, was Emily Wilson. She smiled when she spied Kath. It was quite heartwarming to meet a neighbour who seemed genuinely pleased to see her. Pleasantries exchanged, they began to walk along the path together, and Kath suddenly blurted, "I still remember that story you told about the Bible, that time we were all in the field. Sometimes I wish some of it was even true." Emily looked across at Kath. "Why don't you think it's true?" Kath shrugged. "Lots of reasons." "Such as?" "Well, science has disproved God." "How?" Kath shrugged again. "You know, the Big Bang and evolution proves that God doesn't exist." Emily shook her head. "But that's not true. There is no fact or scientific theory which disproves God. Science relies on observation and experiment to understand the physical world. Where there's lots of evidence and you can observe things behaving in exactly the same way again and again, you can prove whether something's true. Where there's much less evidence, or you can't experiment, there are unproved theories. Some of the theory of evolution, like the ability of species to adapt in a limited way to their environment, you can prove because it happens now and you can observe it. Other parts can't be proved, like species evolving into another species." "I suppose you don't think that monkeys turned into humans then?" interjected Kath. "No," Emily agreed. "Species changing into different species has never been observed, so it's purely theoretical. You can't observe the start of the world, and although they've tried, no scientist has ever recreated this process. Besides, you would have to start with nothing, which is a pretty tricky experiment." Kath flicked a fly off her sleeve. "Well, I don't know all the details, of course, but leading scientists tell us that's what happened, and we'd be daft not to believe the experts." Emily remarked, "Leading scientists also say that the world shows every evidence of being designed, and some of those also believe in God." "Real scientists believe that?" Emily smiled at Kath's incredulous tone. She picked up the tennis ball that Peter had dumped at her feet and threw it into the trees. "Real scientists," she repeated. "Plenty of scientists and other academics believe that there must be a designer or originator of the world. In fact, some believe in God because they can't credit chance, the Big Bang, evolution and such with producing the incredibly intricate universe we live in. So you can't really decide about God based on what scientists think. You'd need other evidence instead." There was a pause in which Kath bent to pick up the ball that had been quickly returned by Peter. Peter was watching it intently, joyful when it was thrown, herring helter-skelter down the path with Cable close behind. At last Kath said, "I guess it's each to their own. You've got your way, I've got mine. As long as we're happy." She didn't sound convincingly happy about her own chosen way, and she seemed to realize it as she quickly added with a laugh, "Well, as happy as we can be, anyway." Emily kicked a pine cone from the path. "But belief of any kind should surely be based on evidence. We can choose to believe anything we like, which might appeal to us or make us feel happy. But if we know that isn't based on the truth, we'll never be really satisfied." Kath chuckled. "It's funny to hear a religious person talking about evidence. I always thought they steered well clear of any proof and blindly hoped for the best." Emily was also amused. When you look at the abundance of design in the world, you would think that evolutionists are the ones ignoring the evidence. "Touché," said Kath with a smile. "Well, perhaps we should agree that creation and evolution theories are both guesswork. Maybe we can't be sure about anything." They reached a fork in the path, and Kath gestured to the trail that led towards Kimbaki. She was walking further, she said. She might even go as far as Kimbaki. She was genuinely sorry that Emily had to turn back. Debating their opposite worldviews distracted her from the whole sorry mess about the money. At least, for a while.